she slept on the ground. Not once. Not for a night. But for her entire life. While everyone else in the village laid their heads on woven mats, wooden beds, or soft animal skins, she chose the dirt. Cold. Hard. Unforgiving. Even when rain turned the earth to mud. Even when insects crawled across her skin. Even when her body aged and her bones ached. People whispered that she was cursed. Others said she was possessed. Some believed she was hiding a terrible sin. Children were warned not to touch the place where she slept. Elders avoided looking at her too long. Strangers felt uneasy just passing by her resting spot, as if the ground itself was watching them back. No one could understand why a woman so gentle, so quiet, so kind would choose a life of discomfort, when comfort was offered again and again. They begged her. They mocked her. They threatened her. She never explained. Every night, as the village settled into sleep, she lowered herself to the earth, pressed her palm into the soil, and closed her eyes, as if listening to something no one else could hear. And the most terrifying part wasn't that she slept on the ground. It was what happened whenever she didn't. By morning, the village returned to its rhythm, as if nothing strange had ever existed. Roosters called out from behind clay huts. Smoke rose in thin blue lines from cooking fires, carrying the smell of millet porridge and roasted roots. Children chased one another through the dust, their laughter light and careless, feet slapping against the earth that had held 1,000 generations before them. Women moved toward the river with calabashes balanced on their heads, speaking in low, familiar voices. Men prepared tools for the fields, sharpening blades worn smooth by years of use. Life here followed patterns older than memory. In the center of the village stood the great baobab tree, its massive trunk scarred with time, its shade wide enough to shelter half the community. Elders gathered beneath it every morning, sitting on carved stools, settling small disputes, sharing news, recalling stories passed down from their own elders before them. This was a place of balance, tradition, and order. A place where nothing truly changed. Homes were simple but warm. Floors were swept clean each day. Mats were woven with care. Sleeping spaces were prepared with love, raised slightly from the ground to keep away moisture, insects, and cold. To sleep well was considered a blessing. To offer someone a bed was a sign of respect. That was why her choice felt so wrong. She lived among them, not apart. She fetched water when asked. She helped grind grain. She soothed crying children with a soft voice and steady hands. When someone fell ill, she brought herbs without being asked. When food was scarce, she shared what little she had. And yet, when night came, she refused every kindness. As the sun sank low and the sky turned amber, families retreated into their homes. Lamps were lit. Evening prayers were whispered. Laughter softened into murmurs. One by one, doors closed. That was when she moved. Quietly, without ceremony, she walked to the same place she always did, an open patch of earth near the edge of the village, where the ground was bare and slightly uneven. No mat. No cloth. No protection. She lowered herself slowly, as if respecting the soil beneath her. Sometimes she pressed her ear to the ground. Sometimes her hand rested flat against it, fingers spread, unmoving. Then she slept. People noticed. Of course they did. Mothers pulled their children closer when passing her at night. Visitors asked questions in hushed tones. New brides stared in disbelief. Even the elders, men who had seen droughts, wars, and famines, avoided discussing her directly. Instead, they spoke around her. Some people are born different, one would say. Some burdens are chosen, another replied. Some are not meant to be understood, a third concluded. But unease lingered, because this was not how things were done. In a village built on shared customs, shared rituals, and shared ground, her refusal of comfort felt like a quiet rebellion against something sacred. And yet, she broke no rule. She harmed no one. She demanded nothing. Still, when the wind shifted at night, when the earth seemed to breathe beneath their feet, when dreams felt heavier than usual, people remembered where she slept, and wondered what kind of peace required such discomfort. Her name was spoken softly, if it was spoken at all. Not because it was forbidden, but because saying it too loudly felt like an invitation to something no one understood. She had lived in the village for as long as anyone could remember. long enough that no one could point to the day she arrived, and no one could recall a time before her presence felt woven into the land itself. She was not old, but she was not young either. Time seemed unsure of what to do with her. Her face carried fine lines, not from hardship alone, but from listening more than speaking. Her eyes were deep and steady, the kind that held attention without demanding it. When she looked at someone, it felt as if she saw not only who they were, but what they carried silently. She spoke little. When she did, her voice was calm, measured, never rushed. She never argued, never defended herself, never corrected the stories people told about her, even when they were cruel. If asked why she slept on the ground, she would simply smile faintly and say, "This is where I belong tonight." That answer only deepened the mystery. She moved through the village like a quiet current. Children trusted her instinctively. When they scraped their knees or woke from bad dreams, they found comfort beside her without knowing why. Animals lingered near her longer than usual. Even the village dogs, quick to bark at strangers, wagged their tails and lay near her feet. She was kind in ways that went unnoticed until she wasn't there. If a woman gave birth alone, she appeared at dawn with warm water and clean cloths. If a man lost his harvest, she shared food without making him feel ashamed. When the elders debated long into the night, she listened from a distance, never offering opinions, yet somehow calming the air around them. Still, there was something about her that kept people from getting too close. She never stayed inside anyone's home after sunset. She never accepted gifts meant for comfort, blankets, mats, raised beds. When someone insisted, she thanked them sincerely, then left the item untouched, returning it the next morning as if it had never been offered. At night, as the village grew still, some claimed they saw her standing barefoot on the soil before she lay down. Completely still. Eyes closed. Breathing slow. As if waiting for permission. Rumors began to shape her into something else. Some said she had made a promise to the ancestors. Others believed she was paying for a mistake made long ago. A few whispered that she could hear things underground. Voices, warnings, secrets meant only for her. No one knew where these stories began. They simply appeared. Once, a curious boy asked her directly, his voice shaking, "Does the ground talk to you?" She knelt to his level, brushed dust from his hands, and smiled gently. "The ground remembers," she said. Nothing more. That night, the boy dreamed of roots wrapping around his feet, holding him safely in place while a great wind passed overhead. People began watching her more closely after that. They noticed how she always slept in the same place. How she never turned away from the center of the village, even in rest. How her hand always touched the earth, palm down, like a promise she renewed every night. Whatever her reason was, it wasn't fear. It was devotion. And devotion, when unexplained, frightened people more than madness ever could. The first sign was so small that most people missed it. One morning, just before dawn, the goats refused to cross a narrow stretch of land near where she slept. They pulled against their ropes, hooves digging into the dirt, eyes wide and restless. The herder laughed it off, blaming a snake or a scent left behind in the night. By midday, the animals had calmed, and the moment was forgotten. But the ground remembered. Soon after, cracks began appearing in the soil, not deep enough to cause alarm, just thin lines like veins spreading quietly beneath the dust. They always started near the place where her body rested at night and faded as they moved away, as if something beneath the earth was stretching, testing its limits. The elders noticed. They said nothing. Then came the nights when the air felt heavier. Fires burned lower than usual. Drums sounded dull, their rhythm uneven, as if the earth itself was absorbing the sound. People slept, but their dreams grew strange, filled with weight, pressure, and the feeling of being held down and protected at the same time. Still, the village woke each morning intact. No crops failed. No child fell ill. No storm came early. And so the signs were dismissed as coincidence, the kind that only feels important in hindsight. She noticed everything. When the cracks appeared, she traced them with her fingers before lying down. When the goats refused to pass, she adjusted where she slept by no more than a hand's width. When the drums sounded wrong, she stayed awake longer, palm pressed firmly into the soil, eyes closed in concentration. No one saw her do this. Or if they did, they pretended not to. But whispers grew louder. "She's feeding something beneath us," one woman murmured. "She's keeping it asleep," another replied. "What happens if she stops?" someone asked. That question lingered. One night, after a long council meeting, an elder stayed behind under the baobab tree, watching the village settle. He noticed something unsettling. The place where she slept was warmer than the surrounding ground, even after the evening breeze cooled the air. Not hot. Just alive. The next morning, he walked the perimeter of the village, staff tapping lightly against the soil. The ground felt firm everywhere except near her resting place, where it yielded slightly, like packed earth above a buried root. Or something else. Stranger still, whenever she was away from the village during the day, fetching herbs or visiting the river, the land felt ordinary again. Still. Silent. But as dusk approached and she returned, the air shifted. Birds quieted sooner. Insects gathered lower to the ground. The village seemed to lean inward, waiting. She never acknowledged the change. People began testing the mystery in small, cruel ways. A mat was placed where she usually slept, uninvited. That night, the wind rose suddenly, snapping branches and scattering ash from cooking fires. The mat was gone by morning, shredded and half buried in the dirt. Another night, someone marked a boundary in the soil, daring her to sleep elsewhere. She stepped over it without hesitation, laid down as always. Before dawn, the marking had vanished, smoothed over as if it had never existed. Fear replaced curiosity. Because nothing attacked them. Nothing revealed itself fully. Whatever was happening responded not with violence, but with warning. And she bore it all silently. Her shoulders grew tenser. Her sleep lighter. Some nights, she whispered words into the ground, too low to hear, too careful to catch. Other nights, tears slipped into the dust beneath her cheek. The village stood on something unseen. And she was the only one holding it back. By the time fear truly arrived, it no longer needed to announce itself. It settled into the village like a second shadow, quiet, constant, impossible to ignore. People spoke less at night. Fires were extinguished earlier. Children were called indoors before the sun fully set. Every sound after dark seemed louder than it should have been. Every vibration beneath bare feet felt suspicious. And all of it circled back to her. The elders met more frequently beneath the baobab tree. Their voices, once steady and deliberate, now carried strain. They spoke of balance, of unseen forces, of the danger of allowing one person to stand between the village and whatever lay beneath the earth. "She is not one of the ancestors," one elder said. "She is not a spirit," another replied. "She is only a woman," a third insisted. "And no woman should hold this much power." That word, power, changed everything. People began watching her with new eyes. Kindness turned cautious. Gratitude thinned into suspicion. When she passed through the village, conversations stopped. When she helped, hands lingered less, smiles faded faster. Children were told not to sit near her anymore. She noticed. But she said nothing. Instead, the signs intensified. One afternoon, a deep tremor rolled through the ground, not strong enough to break anything, but powerful enough to knock clay pots from shelves and send birds screaming into the sky. It lasted only a heartbeat. Long enough for everyone to feel it. That night, she did not sleep. She lay on the ground as always, but her eyes remained open. Her palm pressed harder into the soil, fingers trembling slightly. For the first time, those who watched from a distance saw fear cross her face. Something was wrong. The next morning, a section of the footpath near her sleeping place had sunk lower, forming a shallow bowl in the earth. The soil there was dark and damp, though no rain had fallen. When one man stepped too close, the ground shifted under his weight, forcing him back. Panic spread. "She is weakening," someone whispered. "She can't hold it forever," another replied. "What if she lets go on purpose?" a third asked. That was when the village turned. A group approached her just before sunset, carrying a woven mat, thick and carefully made. Their leader spoke firmly, though his hands shook. "You will sleep on this tonight," he said. "You cannot lie directly on the earth anymore." She looked at the mat, then at the ground, then at the faces around her, faces she had helped, comforted, protected for years. "I can't," she said softly. It was the first refusal anyone had heard from her. Anger flared. "You won't explain," one woman cried. "You won't listen," another added. "You are endangering us all," the leader said. She opened her mouth, as if to speak further, then closed it. Her gaze dropped to the soil beneath her feet. "I'm already holding more than you know," she whispered. They didn't hear it, or chose not to. That night, someone moved her. Not violently, but firmly. They guided her to a raised sleeping platform at the edge of the village, layered with cloth and animal skin. She resisted only once, pressing her hand desperately into the ground before being pulled away. The moment her palm left the soil, a low sound rippled beneath the village. Not a roar. A groan. Deep. Ancient. Awake. And far below them, something shifted. The ground did not wait until morning. It began with a sound so deep it was felt more than heard, a slow, grinding pressure that rolled beneath the village like breath forced through stone. Clay walls shuddered. Roof beams creaked. Dogs whimpered and hid. People woke in confusion, sitting upright on their sleeping mats as the earth vibrated beneath them. She felt it immediately. From the raised platform, her body tensed, every instinct screaming that something was wrong. She swung her legs over the side, feet searching for soil, but found only wood. Her breath caught. The distance between her and the ground felt unbearable, like a stretched rope about to snap. Another tremor followed. Stronger this time. Outside, cracks split the earth in jagged lines, racing through the village paths like dark veins. A cooking fire collapsed into itself, sparks hissing as they vanished into widening gaps. The great baobab groaned, its roots shifting, bark shedding in thick flakes. People ran. Someone shouted her name for the first time in years, not in fear of her, but in fear of what was happening without her. She forced herself off the platform and stumbled toward the open ground, ignoring the pain in her joints, the dizziness pulling at her vision. But before she could reach her place, the soil lurched violently, throwing her forward. She hit the dirt hard, gasping. The earth was burning hot. She pressed her palm down anyway. Instantly, the ground pulsed beneath her hand, as if recognizing her touch. The tremors softened, but did not stop. It was like trying to calm a waking child already half out of a nightmare. She whispered urgently, words older than the village itself. Her voice shook. Sweat soaked into the soil beneath her cheek. Around her, the village watched in horror. They saw it then, clearly. Where her hand touched the earth, the cracks slowed. Where her body lay flat against the ground, the vibrations dulled. But everywhere else, the land continued to strain and shift, as if something massive was turning beneath the surface. "It's responding to her," one elder breathed. A sudden scream cut through the night. A section of earth near the grain storage collapsed inward, forming a shallow sinkhole. Two men barely pulled a child back in time. Dust rose thick and choking. She cried out, not in fear, but in anguish. "I told you," she whispered to the soil. "I never left. I was only moved." Her body shook as she pressed herself harder into the ground, arms spread wide now, as if trying to cover more than one person ever could. Blood trickled from a scrape on her arm, dark against the dirt. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the earth began to settle. Cracks closed themselves, edges grinding back together. The groaning beneath the village softened to a distant murmur, then faded entirely. Fires burned steady again. The baobab stood still. Silence returned. She did not move. At dawn, the villagers gathered around her. She lay unconscious, face pressed to the soil, breath shallow but steady. The ground beneath her was smooth now, unbroken, calm, almost peaceful. Shame spread through the crowd. No one spoke of forcing her away again. But fear had changed shape. Because now they understood something far worse than a curse or madness. She was not choosing discomfort. She was restraining something that did not belong to sleep. And the question no one dared to ask aloud hung heavy in the air. How long could one human body hold the earth itself in place? She woke as the sun broke over the horizon, its light thin and pale, as if even the sky was uncertain. Her body felt heavy, pinned to the earth by exhaustion rather than force. Every muscle ached. Her palms still rested flat against the ground, fingers stiff, numb from hours of pressure. When she tried to move, A sharp pain cut through her shoulder, and she gasped softly. The village was gathered around her in a wide, silent circle. No one dared step closer. The elders stood at the front, faces drawn, eyes red from a night without rest. Behind them were mothers clutching children, men gripping tools they did not know how to use against what they had felt beneath their feet. For the first time, no one looked at her with suspicion. They looked at her with fear mixed with something else. Reverence. She pushed herself up slowly, brushing dirt from her cheek. Her gaze lifted, meeting theirs one by one. She did not accuse them. She did not plead. She only looked tired. "You should not have touched the ground last night," an elder finally said, his voice unsteady. "I never stopped," she replied quietly. "I was only lifted away." A murmur passed through the crowd. Someone stepped forward, a woman whose child she had once saved during a fever. Tears streaked her face. "What is it?" she asked. "What is under us?" For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she shook her head. "If I speak it fully," she said, "you will try to fight it, or worship it, or flee, and none of those will save you." Her refusal, gentle as it was, cut deeper than anger ever could. She stood, swaying slightly, and returned to her place on the ground, lowering herself with care. When her body touched the earth again, the tension in the air eased, like a breath finally released. But it was not enough anymore. The ground trembled faintly beneath her palm, small, restless movements, like something testing its boundaries again. Her jaw tightened. She closed her eyes, focusing, breathing in slow measured counts. The eldest of the elders stepped forward, staff sinking slightly into the soil as he approached. He knelt beside her for the first time in decades. "You are suffering," he said. "We see it now." She opened her eyes. In them was a sadness so deep it seemed older than the village itself. "I have always suffered," she said. "You just did not have to feel it before." That was the moment everything changed. Because the villagers began to understand that whatever bound her to the ground was not a gift, it was a burden. One she had chosen to carry alone. A young man asked the question no one else could bring themselves to speak. "What happens when you are gone?" Her breath caught. The earth beneath them shuddered, just slightly, as if reacting to the thought. She pressed her hand down harder. "That is why I cannot leave," she said. Her voice cracked, not with fear, but with grief. "I was not meant to live forever." A ripple of panic moved through the crowd. Children began to cry. The elders exchanged horrified looks. For the first time, she allowed them to see the cost. Her hands were scarred from years of contact with the soil. Her joints were swollen. Her breathing was shallow, controlled, as if every breath was measured against something waiting below. "This is not punishment," she continued, "and it is not a blessing. It is a promise I made, when no one else could." She looked at the ground beneath her, then back at them. But promises break when the body does. The tremor beneath the village grew stronger, just enough to be felt by everyone standing there. And in that moment, they realized the truth was not coming. It was already too late to ignore. The truth did not arrive like thunder. It surfaced slowly, the way something ancient rises after being held down for far too long. She lay on the ground as the village watched, her breathing shallow, her hand pressed firmly into the soil. The tremors beneath her palm were no longer sudden. They were rhythmic now, measured, deliberate, like a massive heartbeat beneath the earth. The eldest elder knelt beside her again, his voice low. "You said this was a promise," he said. "To whom?" Her eyes remained closed. "To the land," she answered. "And to you." Silence spread. Long ago, before the oldest hut was built, before the baobab had fully grown, the ground beneath the valley had shifted violently. The earth cracked open without warning, swallowing homes, animals, and people alike. Those who survived fled in panic, leaving the land scarred and angry. She was a child then, orphaned, alone, small enough to fall through the cracks without being crushed. Beneath the surface, she had felt it, not a creature, not a spirit in the way stories describe, but a living force. A pressure born from imbalance. The land itself, strained beyond its limits, searching for release. And it had reached for her. Not to destroy her. To anchor itself. She had been pulled back to the surface by villagers who believed she had survived by miracle alone. But that night, as aftershocks rolled through the valley, she returned to the cracked earth by herself. Instinct guided her. Fear followed, but she stayed. When her body pressed against the ground, the shaking stopped. The land settled. The elders of that time had understood just enough to be terrified. They spoke of appeasement, sacrifice, abandonment of the valley. She had spoken only once. It stops when I'm here. So a promise was made. Not written. Not celebrated. Not shared. She would sleep on the ground. She would remain in contact with the soil that had chosen her. She would serve as weight, as balance, as a living seal between the village and the force beneath. Not forever. Just long enough for the land to heal. But the land never fully healed, she whispered. And neither did I. She opened her eyes then, meeting the stares around her. The tremors grew stronger, not violent, but insistent. The earth learned my shape, she continued. My warmth. My weight. It adapted to me. Her voice shook. Now it does not know how to rest without it. A collective breath caught in the village. This was no curse. This was no madness. This was not even destiny. It was sacrifice stretched too long. I did not sleep on the ground because I was less than you, she said. I did it so you could sleep peacefully above it. Tears ran freely now. People knelt. Some pressed their foreheads into the dirt in shame. The elder's voice broke. Why didn't you tell us? She smiled faintly, exhaustion softening her features. Because if you had known, you would have tried to replace me. The tremors surged. For years, she said, I believed I could hold it until the end of my life. But the ground is growing restless again. Her hand trembled against the soil. I am tired, she whispered. And the land knows it. The truth settled heavier than fear ever had. Because now the village understood the final horror. They had not been living on safe ground. They had been living on borrowed time. The village did not sleep that night. No one returned to their beds. No lamps were lit. People gathered around her in silence, sitting directly on the bare earth for the first time in their lives, not out of fear, but out of understanding. She lay at the center, her body thin with exhaustion, her breathing slow and careful. The ground beneath her no longer trembled violently. Instead, it pulsed faintly, like a heart finally being listened to. At dawn, the elders made a decision no council had ever faced before. They would not ask her to hold the land alone anymore. One by one, they removed their sandals. They knelt. They pressed their palms into the soil, just as she had done every night for decades. At first, nothing happened. Then the earth responded, not with force, but with warmth. She felt it immediately. Her eyes opened in surprise as the pressure beneath her hand eased, just slightly. For the first time in her memory, the weight was not entirely hers. Tears slipped from the corners of her eyes. The children followed. Then the women. Then the men. Soon, the entire village was touching the ground, not as owners of it, but as caretakers. The tremors faded. The land did not need one body anymore. It needed many. In the days that followed, a new ritual was born. Each night, different villagers slept on the bare earth near the center of the village, sharing the contact, sharing the responsibility. The ground remained calm. Crops grew strong. The air felt lighter. And she slept. Not on a bed. But not alone on the ground either. She was given a place among them. Her body no longer stretched thin between the living and the land. Her health slowly returned. The scars on her hands remained, but they were no longer wounds, they were reminders. Years later, when she finally died, the earth did not shake. The village mourned, but the ground held. Elders told the children the truth, not as fear, but as wisdom. They spoke of a woman who was mistaken for cursed because she chose discomfort. Of a protector judged for her silence. Of a sacrifice made invisible by peace. They taught them this. Some people suffer quietly so others never have to know danger exists. Some love looks like endurance. And some heroes leave no monument, because their work is felt, not seen. To this day, travelers who pass through the valley are told to place their hand on the earth before they sleep. not in fear, in gratitude, because the ground remembers, and it remembers her.